Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. I'm prompted to make this video because as of September 2024, the New South Wales government has announced that it's making a change to the way it uses point-to-point cameras. I'll come back and explain that in more detail in a moment, but first I thought I would make some observations about cameras in general, that is security cameras, traffic monitoring cameras, CCTV cameras and so forth. I think it'd be fair to say that there are two schools of thought about the deployment and use of cameras like that. One school of thought says that the job of politicians is to keep the community safe, and installing CCTV cameras or security cameras or traffic monitoring cameras or speed cameras or whatever is all part of keeping the community safe, and therefore it's a good idea. And on one level, that sounds like a sensible argument. You would want your children to be safe when they're out. You would want your wife, daughter, girlfriend, mother, son, husband, or something like that to be safe when they're coming home after a night out, when they're walking to their car, in a darkened car park perhaps, when they're getting off the train late at night and walking home. You would want them to be safe. And so on, as I said, on one level, that argument about making the community safe seems like a sensible one. The other side of that argument, or the other argument, would be those people who say that we are surveilled far too much, that there are cameras everywhere surveilling people who are generally law-abiding people, and that for the most part the use of cameras, be they traffic monitoring cameras or speed cameras or CCTV cameras or some other sort of camera, is more about monitoring people's movements and collecting data about them than it is about community safety. Now, I'm going to leave you to make your own mind up about which way you lean on that argument, but in regard to traffic monitoring, speed cameras, red light cameras and so forth, the government, and that'd be whichever government's in power, would say that all of the money that's collected from the infringement notices, that is the fines you get if you run a red light or get caught at a speed camera, goes into road safety programs. And I can hear some of the viewers going, yeah, right. They would say that, wouldn't they? And of course they would, but I have no evidence to dispute that, so I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying I don't have any evidence for it. While we're talking about cameras, it's a good idea now to perhaps stop and think about our own use of cameras. Just about everybody these days carries a mobile phone, and the mobile phone's biggest selling feature isn't its ability to talk to other people, its ability to take high resolution photographs and video and so forth. And many a person, from that goofy friend of ours that in every group that does stupid things all the time, to minor celebrities, have been caught by somebody pulling out their phone and videoing somebody doing something dumb and then posting it on social media or attempting to sell it to a newspaper or something like that. Many drivers are installing dash cams in their cars, with the argument being, well, I want some video evidence. If I'm in an accident, I'll have video evidence to show the insurance company that I was doing the right thing and the other guy was at fault. In some, but not all cars, there are now driver fatigue cameras, and they are usually mounted either in the mirror somewhere, in the rear vision mirror, or on the A pillar on the driver's side. And the idea of those cameras is that the software that operates them thinks you're not paying sufficient attention to the road, or your eyes are wandering too far from the road. It'll start beeping at you and alerting you that you are not paying attention to the road. So cameras are everywhere, and we use them perhaps indiscriminately sometimes to photograph people doing inappropriate things because we get a laugh out of them. So the New South Wales government in September of 2024, as I said, decided that their point-to-point cameras, which had been installed to monitor the driving habits of truck drivers, would now be used to monitor the driving habits of all drivers. Now, if you're not familiar with these cameras, what they are is there's be a large gantry constructed across both lanes of the highway somewhere. I'm familiar with them because they're on the Hume Highway going southwest of Sydney from Sydney to Canberra. There are a couple of sets of them. And the idea is that as each vehicle passes the camera, it takes a photograph of the car and its number plate. Then, let's say 100 kilometres down the road, there's another camera. Now, I'm not sure if the different distance is 100 kilometres, but let's say for the sake of the illustration, it is 100 kilometres down the road. So the software that the camera uses calculates how long it should take you to travel to the next camera. If you arrive at that camera at a time before the software says you should have got there, it'll assume you got there by speeding. and it will issue you with an infringement notice. In other words, you'll get a fine. If you get there after the infringement notice, then, or after the designated time, then there's no further action. So the idea was originally to monitor truck drivers' behaviour and to clamp down on truckers who might be speeding down the highway. They work 24 hours a day, and they work in obviously darkness as well as daylight. The government said this year that the evidence was that more people were speeding, and people who were speeding at a greater rate. In other words, they weren't just doing 5 or 10 kilometres over the speed limit, they were doing 20 or 30 or 40 kilometres over the speed limit, and the government says that is dangerous, and as part of its programs to keep the community safe, it is now said that the point-to-point cameras will monitor all driver behaviour, and as I said, if you traverse the distance between two of those cameras in less time than the software says you should have done, then they will assume that you got there by speeding and you'll automatically be issued with a fine. So be aware of that, the fact that those cameras exist, be aware that they are now targeting all sorts of driving and that fines will be automatically issued. Now, on the broader question of cameras and their use in managing traffic and so on, think about this. We have red light cameras, and we have them because even though all of our drivers know that red means stop and green means go, there are people who run red lights. I should say here before I go any further that in my view, driving is a privilege. It's not a right, it's a privilege. It's a privilege you earn by reaching a certain age in the first place. In other words, you can't get a learner's permit till you're 16 and 9 months. Then you are meant to take some driving lessons, either with a licensed, a qualified instructor, or with your parents. You're meant to keep a logbook to demonstrate how many hours of driving you've done, under what sort of conditions, and a licensed driver is supposed to sign off on all those things. And when you or the driving instructor thinks you're ready, you're meant to take a driving test. So you go out on the road with an assessor who determines whether you have sufficient level of competency to be able to operate the vehicle that you are attempting to drive, whether it's motorcycle or a car. You then take a computer-based test of your knowledge of the road rules, and if you do okay with both of those things, you'll get a licence. We have a graduated system of licensing in Australia, with a red provisional licence first of all, and then a green provisional licence, and then a full licence. There are restrictions on when you can drive on your red provisional licence, or red P as we call it. You can't be out after certain hours, and there are certain cars that you can't drive and so forth. So driving is a privilege, and if you breach the privilege by doing things that are not approved of by the rules that govern driving, then your licence will be suspended. You will receive a fine, and you will accrue some demerit points, and when you accrue the total of 12 demerit points, or it may be less if you're on a red P or a green P, your licence will be suspended for a period. So, bearing all that in mind, we have these red light cameras, for example, and they're there because clearly people run red lights. If they weren't necessary, if people didn't run red lights, the cameras would not be necessary. If you consider the position of the person who's on the other side of the intersection to you, where the light has just turned green, and they assume that it's green, so it's therefore my turn to go, and they set off on their journey across the intersection, and somebody comes tearing through against the red light and smashes into them, then the results, or the outcome, should I say, could be fatal. We have cameras that monitor the use of mobile phones. And to be clear, the law says, and bearing in mind I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice, it's just a bloke riding a motorcycle having his thoughts about various matters, but the law says you cannot operate your phone unless it is in a hands-free setup of some sort. So you must have a cradle of some sort that holds your phone. It must be Bluetooth to your audio system, or you can operate it hands-free without it being Bluetooth to your audio system, but you cannot have it in your hand. If you have your phone in your hand and you try to argue, well, I was just looking at the GPS or something like that, you're not going to be successful because you're simply not allowed to hold your phone in your hand while you're driving. And the reason for that is that we know that people are distracted by their phone. Those people who just have to send an emoji for that last emoji they got. Those people who just have to see that text message they just got. Those people who just have to search around for that funny emoji that they want to send somebody else, they're distracted from driving. And while they're distracted from driving, while their eyes are not firmly fixed on the road, there is the potential for them to cause an accident, which could be have serious implications for them, or worse, serious implications for somebody else on the road. In 2023, the New South Wales government decided to conduct a trial of seatbelt monitoring cameras. These are the same cameras that monitor your phone usage, they just have another task now. And that is to monitor if you're wearing your seatbelt or if you're wearing it correctly. Now, in 2023, while they were conducting this trial, the New South Wales government says that 11,000 people were fined for failing to wear a seatbelt or failing to wear it correctly. Now, I remember making another video about this some time ago and pointing out that seatbelts have been compulsory in cars since 1969, so that's 50 years nearly. And so we've had campaigns like click, clack, front and back and so on, that it ought to be an automatic response that the moment you get in your car, you put your seatbelt on. We know that seatbelts save lives, and sometimes governments have to override our civil liberties and say this is for your own good and you just have to do it, and people just have to accept that wearing a seatbelt is a sensible requirement and they should do it. But 11,000 people in 2023 didn't. Now in June, the government said, well, we're going to, as of July the 1st, we're going to have this seatbelt monitoring happen with these cameras. There's going to be no period of grace. We're telling you now that it's going to start on the 1st of July, and it did. And in the first month alone, 11,000 people were fined, including a woman who was in the passenger seat of her car holding a baby that she was feeding, and she wasn't restrained, and neither was the child. Now, by that trend, if that trend were to continue for the 12 months, that would be well over 100,000 people were fined in a 12-month period, and the fine, by the way, is $300. So that's, even by my poor maths, that's about $30 million in revenue that is raised from people failing to wear a seatbelt. Now, it's worth pointing out here that it's my understanding that if you're the driver of the vehicle, you are fined for every person in your vehicle who is not wearing a seatbelt. Because you're the driver, you're responsible for every person in your car being correctly buckled, seatbelted, restrained, whatever the word is. You are responsible to make sure that every person driving or in your car is wearing a seatbelt. So let's imagine that you're in your car, which seats 5 people. 4 of the passengers are not wearing seatbelts. That is $1,200 in fines, if I've understood the information correctly, and it is also 3 points, demerit points attached to your licence for each of those people. So in one journey, you could have your licence suspended for 3 months, 6 months, or even longer. Now, to return to the question of are we overly surveilled and are we overly monitored and so forth, as I said, I will leave you to make your own mind up about that, whether that's, as a general thing, a reasonable statement to say, or whether it's reasonable to say that installing cameras in various locations for various purposes is part of keeping the community safe. But it's always been my contention that there is an unwritten covenant between all of us on the road. There are road rules, there are laws about how we're supposed to drive and all that sort of stuff. But the covenant says, and although we perhaps don't all know that we're part of it, we are. The covenant to me is I want to get in my car and I want to go from where I am to where I want to go. So let's say from point A to point B. I want to conduct whatever business I've gone to point B to conduct, whether it's to do shopping, visit my family, go to work or whatever it is, and then I want to get in my car and go from point B back to point A, which is presumably my home, and I want to get there safely. I want to think that I'm going to arrive at point B and do my shopping or visit my family or have a picnic or whatever it is, and then when I've done all those things, I want to think that I can get in my car and drive back to point A, that is to my home, and I will arrive home safely. I will do my best as a driver to obey all the road rules. I will drive safely and sensibly. I will observe all the traffic signs and signals that are posted for me. Where the speed limit says 110, I won't drive more than 110. Where the speed limit drops down for whatever reason, roadworks or coming to a built-up area or something, I will adjust my speed accordingly. I will look at all those yellow signs with the speed advisory that say go around this curve at 75 kilometres an hour, and I will attempt to abide by them to the best of my ability. I might go around at 80 or I might go around at 70, but I will at least acknowledge that I've seen the sign and I will adjust my driving accordingly. I will think about the other users that are on the road with me, those people that are in front of me, those people that are behind me, those people that are in the lane beside me if I'm in a dual carriageway, or those people who are in the lane going the opposite way if I'm on a single lane road, and I will do my best to make sure that they have a pleasant and happy and successful journey. In my view, things like red light cameras are necessary because there are people who obviously run red lights. Whilst I would not be happy if I got a fine for going through a speed camera, I would accept that the speed camera is there. In my street, for example, there's often a mobile speed camera, a little four-wheel drive that's parked there. There are 3 or 4 signs warning me that the speed camera is there. So if I'm still silly enough to exceed the speed limit as I go up and down my street, I guess I deserve what I get. Well, there you go. That's my thoughts on cameras that monitor driver behaviour. I hope it's given you some food for thought, and thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again in the next video.